Here's something I wish I'd known sooner. Something that was crucial back when I was trying to fix my marriage. I said it previously. Learning how to learn is life's most important skill. Said that all here. And the discipline is crucial. Discipline to keep walking the narrow path, taking real action. Move forwards, and that ultimately determines whether we progress, level up, become a hero who can save their loved ones from whatever misery they find themselves in. Be that depression, addiction, toxic relationships, whatever. Stick around until the end for the secret to making it easy to stay on the path. Hi, I'm David. A few short years ago, I was depressed, anxious, facing the implosion of a 10-year marriage, with our 2 small children watching on in a state of innocent bewilderment. The journey of learning and change that I undertook then reversed our fortunes so profoundly, I ended up hired by the program I'd learned from as a relationship coach, leaving a well-paying career to take it up. I'm back from that adventure, no longer coaching, but writing a book to share the lessons, which should be out in around a year's time. I'm not selling you anything now, by the way, but if you find this stuff helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Here's one for your lessons to hammer in the importance of taking action. So, I've heard this story a few different ways, but essentially there is a photography professor, and he says to the first group of students, I would like you to take the best quality photograph that you can this term. 1 photograph. And the quality of that photograph is what I will base your marks on. The other group, the professor says, I would like you to take as many photos as possible. I don't care about quality. I just want to mark you based on how many photographs you accrue. Okay, I had a lesson, and now I'm going to think and 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 take one great photograph and see what the outcome is. No. They're not getting this cycle moving if they're doing that. That second group, how do I take the photo? Based on their justification, they take the dang photo. And then they get the outcome. That's a test. They find their antis. Oh, the lighting was terrible there. That photograph sucked because the lighting was terrible. I need to improve the lighting next time. I need to see which way the sun is relative to it. And then they iterate. And they form a new justification of how they're going to do things. They learn some lessons. New process, they take more steps. They're iterating. But that first group just did this once. So their photograph sucked. They didn't get enough antis. They didn't find enough balance. They didn't keep going around. They were staying in motion instead of taking action. And I've heard this same analogy with throwing pots. It's like a very common business world thing, seems to be. But it applies to anything that you want to get better at. So you see then why we need discipline to keep taking action. It takes discipline to say no to everything that is not just taking jabs, despite the tests. However, at the beginning and at other points in your journey, it'll be like walking a narrow path along a mountain ridge. So you're taking action to reach your goals, but on either side, there's a deep and shadowy valley full of thorns. Fall in and you're soon stuck in motion. Moving, but getting nowhere fast. Continuing to take jabs to find better lessons and steps is how you navigate that narrow path. Look at the cycle. Forming your justification is driven by taking action. Finding your antis only comes when you've taken action and you look back. It only happens then. Finding the new balance of thinking requires yet more action. And of course, iterating. Trying again with your new justification requires taking yet more action. There's a big difference between motion and real action, however. Motion is where we're motivated just enough to keep going, but for reasons I'll get to, things don't move forward. You want to be walking this very narrow path. What constitutes balanced action? Balanced action is taking your jabs at the problem, going through this cycle. That's a huge part of you taking balanced action. Also, practicing the different steps that you've learned, taking that photograph, actually practicing, that is you following your hero montage. You're actually doing the thing. You need to practice and keep practicing so that it becomes something easy and automatic for you that you can just do. That's excellent balanced action of the necessary and sufficient variety. Good enough to eventually get you to your goals. But we don't start off there because maybe you don't have the lessons yet. Maybe you don't actually have all of the learning lessons, all of this, that the principles that you need yet. This stuff is what we call, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Planning steps. So thinking about what steps should I actually take is another necessary, but not sufficient. These alone are not going to save your loved ones and complete your hero journey. You actually need to do these. So let's contrast that to passive motion for a moment. Passive motion is things like where you are overthinking, thinking about what to do, thinking about the situation for hours and hours. And if you've got 24 hours in a day, the same 24 hours as everyone else, overthinking this, pondering the principles and the processes, you're thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Not actually doing it. I saw this so often when I was coaching. So as well as that, there's worrying about your outcome, worrying about this guy. In my case, it was worrying, like, is my partner really going to leave? Is she really going to apply for the divorce when we get back? Is she really going to move out? What are my parents going to think? What are her parents going to say? Well, what are my friends going to think of me? Like, how are the kids going to react to this? Who's going to date me as a man in his late 30s with 2 small children? So many worries about the outcomes. And the thing about worrying about your outcomes for days and days is time that you're spending not doing any action. So forget worrying. Another way that we stay in passive motion, hesitating. Hesitating to ask, to act, to actually just do the thing. Like I said before in that example with the photography, right? People who are knowing that this is like their one photo. So they spend half an hour, 2 hours posing, getting the lighting perfect, getting everything ready. They're hesitating. They don't want to take the shot until everything is perfect. But you're never going to do this. You're never going to iterate because you're constantly in this stage of forming a justification. You don't act, you never get the antis. That is a way that we can get stuck in passive motion. So we've talked now about balanced action. We've talked about passive motion. Now let's talk about active motion. Active motion is when we are wasting time rushing and learning things only conceptually. This is the people who are not really getting the right lessons. They're not really forming their justification. They're just taking steps. And when you're taking steps without the right lessons behind it, without forming that right justification, you're just going to get a bad outcome, but you're not going to know why. This was something that I did when I first joined that program. I was rushing, and so I didn't absorb the lessons properly. And some of the steps that I was taking were the wrong steps. And when I was a coach, I saw this same thing all the time. You'd see somebody who a week into the program, they would be saying, I'm already on phase 3, I'm already on phase 4. It's like, what are you doing? It's like trying to build the second floor of a building before you finish the concrete foundation. The only thing you're doing faster is starting over. So that's rushing. So skimming. What do we mean by skimming? That's really moving without taking the right lessons, the right jabs. You're learning something conceptually, maybe doing this once, and you're moving on before you have experientially understood all of the lessons that you needed there. Another way that we stay in active motion, people who just take mindless reps, they're mindlessly going through what they're meant to do without thinking about why or how to do it. I would see this all the time as a coach. People who put out the same quality practice, posting a video of them doing that every few days, or sometimes every day, but they clearly had not been really doing this part. They're just doing what they're told without really understanding why. So they never program it deeply as that experiential learning. So it doesn't become a part of just what they do. Another key way that we fall into this active motion is by having this TBU focus. So what's TBU? TBU is when something is true, but it's useless. If you're focused on those things, you're like focused on, plan out a schedule that's going to get you where you need to be within the very narrow window of time that you've left yourself. If that's not what your coach has told you to do, you need to be saying no to everything that's not this. Planning steps, learning the lessons, practicing, and taking jabs at the problem. Anything else is TBU. So the last one for active motion. You see this a lot in employees and salary people who are really just doing busy work, keeping things ticking over, ticking boxes, getting their emails down to 0, not actually thinking about what will move things forward. What is the key focus of my job? What is the why behind it? They're just doing all the little busy things so they can clock out at 5 o'clock. That achieves nothing. So there we have it. Passive motion, balanced action, and active motion. We want to be in this middle, walking that narrow path, not falling into the ravine where all of the sharp vines are. So you can see how easy it is to fall off the path. I shared this next part a week ago in the program that I'm still part of the community for. It's an explanation of the struggle we face when we're trying to take on a challenge. Any challenge. Be that a new business, a plan to lose weight, learning how to be a better person to save a marriage. Something that I'm seeing, this idea that discipline is king. And look, discipline is king. Let's draw it out, okay? We're going to have 4 quadrants here. We're going to talk about discipline on this axis. We're going to talk about motivation on this axis. And if you have enough discipline, enough up here, you will be taking necessary but not sufficient action. So that's like pure discipline. If you can just use willpower, this is why we say in the program that, hey, willpower is not enough. You need to actually untether. And that's the thing. You don't want to be taking just necessary but not sufficient action. You don't want that. You want to actually build enough motivation. But what affects our motivation? And this is why discipline is king, right? Because motivation is tethered at the beginning. When you start out, your motivation is tied to your outcomes. How are things going for you right now? So you want to be moving up this way. You want to be building motivation, but your motivation is actually going from side to side because of tethering. So you need enough action, not just necessary, but necessary and sufficient action. So we need necessary and sufficient action so that we can actually get our success here, all right? And what happens in this last quadrant? Let's say we don't have enough discipline. We don't have enough motivation. Motion, failures mindset. You end up operating as a kind of an extra on the stage. You're no longer a lead character. You no longer have any power and control over events. You are just a paper bag being blown around, okay? So let's look at a bunch of different circumstances here, a bunch of different scenarios. Let's say that you are somebody who comes into the program here. You have a bit of discipline. You know how to get a job done when you set your mind to it. You can, use your willpower to direct yourself to the task and focus on it. You have some discipline, okay? You also have some motivation. You want to do the thing, okay? So let's say you start off here. Now, I'm going to use this color. Nobody is going to begin doing the work and then steadily increase their motivation and discipline the whole time, continuing to take more and more necessary and sufficient action and just smashing it straight out of the park from the first time that they ever swing the bat, okay? This person is what we call unicorn, okay? Does not exist. So we don't expect this. We don't expect this from anyone. The way that it might actually go, let's say you come in with enough discipline and motivation, all right? Cool, great. You've come into this thing, you're sufficiently motivated, but let's say, wow, this is a bit difficult. Motivation actually tracks downwards for a while, but it's okay. You're still moving towards, slowly heading upwards in this, building discipline. You're building enough discipline and you start to get some things done, okay? Necessary, but not necessarily sufficient, but you're getting things done and that builds your motivation slowly. And eventually, you're getting some really good stuff done now because you used your discipline to keep you moving in an upwards direction. This is why discipline is king. Discipline is king because it's going to keep you moving upwards on this so that eventually you can head to the right as well. The idea is that you'll never actually get anywhere without motivation in the end. But we have tethering and things like that is going to, affect that motivation. So it's going to go from left to right, but that's okay. Eventually, when you begin, you've done enough necessary, sufficient, you start to do some actual action, working on untethering, and great, motivation keeps going up. Now you're doing some really good stuff, but okay, cool. Motivation's going to flag because you're going to have hard weeks, you're going to have hard times. You're not a unicorn. You are naturally going to end up back over here again, but your discipline will keep you moving upward. And eventually you end up taking plenty of action, having this trajectory so that you are doing all the things that you need to do to get some amazing results. So let's just say this is you, all right? Now, what's an alternative to that? Let's say you come into things. Let's say you approach this sucker with a whole lot less discipline. You're actually not one of those people who's right up here to begin with. You're down here. Okay, so you've got all this motivation and you're going hard. You're doing some necessary but not sufficient stuff. Okay, you're getting some things done. Oh, but what's this? You're having a really shit week. Everything's going terribly. You're in trouble at work, whatever. And your motivation begins to crash. You don't have a huge amount of discipline. So actually you start to move downwards. You notice this? Downwards trajectory here. You don't have a lot of discipline keeping you going. And so you end up heading in a downwards direction. You're heading towards basically staying in motion. You're not really doing necessary and sufficient action anymore. And you're heading towards this failure mindset. Now, this is bad. You're heading in a downwards direction now. But maybe something motivates you again, and this whips around. And as you build that motivation, you manage to stick to the work again, you build some discipline, and yay, you're taking some necessary but still not sufficient action. Well, what happens then is, because you're just still taking necessary but not sufficient action, maybe you get some feedback that, hey, you're not actually doing the things you need to be doing. And the simple fact that you're not really taking action, the simple fact that you're not really moving the dial forward, you're still floundering down here, demotivates you again. And you feel like, you haven't untethered yet. You haven't started to love just doing the work, making things happen. So yeah, you head back down again. And this time, even more demotivated. You end up in motion. You end up in this failure mindset. So starting down here, you have to build this discipline as fast as you possibly can, right? This suddenly becomes crucial. This suddenly becomes key. And look, let's just very quickly talk about like an even worse situation. Let's say you start off with not a whole lot of motivation to begin with, right? You're one of these people who is just like not that bothered. Like, maybe I just want to give up. Maybe hopeless indifference is the way for me. I mean, I want to get some good results in my life, but I don't know if I really, really want that. I'm choosing my hard, and the hard that I'm choosing is, feeling sorry for myself over here. And I'm not going to do the work. I'm going to feel like crap in the future, but I want to comfort myself right now. Okay, so you're choosing that. And all you ever do is you build up a little bit of motivation, but it's never enough. You never really have enough discipline to ever break out of this. And you end up in this kind of a spiral here. Motion and failure, motion and failure. You never ever break out. But what can we do for these people who start off with not a humongous amount of discipline? Well, how can we get this discipline? If you begin to let's say if you're here, right? You're taking some necessary but not sufficient action. Let's say you make it to here. Work on your hero mindset. Work on building that hero mindset. Work on realizing that at the end of the day, there are going to be so many things that demotivate you. There are going to be so many things that are outside your control. You can't change the fact that you're in trouble at work. Now, not in the short term. Maybe you can do something about that over the long term. You can't change the fact that that person is pissed off at you. These are things that you can't fix right now. But what can you do? You can work on yourself. You can continue to improve your habits a little bit each day. You can continue to do your hero montage, your DPPs, your daily practice processes. You can continue to learn more principles and learn more processes, taking those steps that you need, learning those lessons that you need to continually better things through the POS. Keep taking jabs at the problem, keep punching it, keep just hammering away at it until you get to the point where you can actually start to become a performer. You've done this enough now that that's motivating in and of itself. That instead of spiraling back here, you keep heading in this direction, okay? Keep heading in this direction until you eventually break out. You'll find yourself here. You don't get caught in this spiral because of those hero mindsets, because of the performer's mindset. All right, guys. So that's it. Yes, discipline is king. But it doesn't matter how much discipline you start off with. It doesn't matter how much motivation you start off with. If you get to building those hero mindsets and focusing just on what you can do, if you learn the lessons you need to learn, if you take the steps you need to take, this discipline will build because of this hero mindset. This motivation will build as you begin to do the work. All right, guys. And as a bonus, just for you guys, here's where passive and active motion fit into things. There's your passive motion. Passive motion here is really where you're having a little bit of discipline, but not enough. So you spend that time overthinking, worrying, hesitating. You can apply yourself, but you're not strongly disciplined enough to break out into taking the necessary but not sufficient action that you should be doing. You're not motivated enough to get you to this other side where if you've got a bit of motivation but not enough to actually get into doing the necessary but not sufficient stuff, the lessons and the steps that you need, then you end up stuck in this kind of active motion place where you're motivated, but you're rushing, you're skimming, you're taking mindless reps, You got a TBU focus and busy work. So without a balance here, this is where balanced action comes in. It's really when you are getting yourself to this point here. You've managed to have enough hero mindset that you can muster enough discipline and motivation to get you to this point, whether it's taking necessary but not sufficient action at the moment, whether it's, because you've got a surplus of discipline, whether it's you've got a surplus of motivation and just enough discipline. Either way, that's fine. Eventually you get yourself to this place where you're taking action. In future vids, I'll talk a lot more about how that hero mindset is actually built. But for now, choosing to become that hero, it's just a choice. It's a choice to be the hero. In every hard situation that you come across, that you will be faced with, you will have an option. Do I focus on what I can do? Or do I instead focus on what the world, the environment, others are doing that I cannot control? But you can always choose, what can I do? Well, like I said, in future vids, I'll talk a lot more about how we build that. I'll also make vids on how the hero untethers from outcomes. They stop focusing on this and they tie their motivation to the journey itself. Let me know in the comments what action you need to take next on your journey. Stay awesome all.